Welcome to another edition of Recovery Happens. We have a special guest, the announcer for the Detroit Red Wings from Fox Sports Detroit, Ken Daniels, as he discusses how addiction affected his son and those that he loves.
Well, Jamie was just a fun-loving, loyal kid, laugh that was infectious. And after Jamie passed, people told us, the best thing about Jamie was when other kids felt isolated and not part of the group, they could always rely on Jamie to bring them into the group and to reach out. And that's really who he was. And I think for Jamie, it started really in high school. We didn't really think much of it at the time. We didn't think he had ADHD. He wanted more time on tests. So of course he gets tested. And after Jamie had gone through one of the stages of recovery, he told us that he had fooled the doctor and managed to let him believe that he had ADHD when he didn't. So of course that starts with Adderall, which I believe can be certainly a gateway. Because what happens is Jamie had the Adderall at his disposal. He did okay in school, wound up graduating with a 3.5 from Michigan State. So I believe it started with the Adderall, some type of substance use disorder that he didn't need, that doctors too readily prescribed. And then when he was in college, it was in his freshman year and in a fraternity that one of his friends turned him on to opioids. And I know that because about 2 months after Jamie passed, that friend called me asking for forgiveness from me. He was the one who turned Jamie on to opioids. And I believe within 5 days in his freshman year at Michigan State, Jamie was addicted and somehow managed to get through 4 years of college and did okay. We saw it off and on. And then sure enough, when he struggled and went to rehab and came out of rehab, and when he was out here in Michigan, he said, boy, Dad, that's a sickness I'm never going through again, which is why, as you know, those with substance use disorder continue to use, because the brain says, no, I don't want to feel that illness. I want to feel better. So I'm going to keep using because I don't want to feel as sick as I'm going to feel. And that's exactly what Jamie felt. And sure enough, he was home and I had my kid back. He was, clear thinking. It was great. It was wonderful. And if I only knew then what I know now, right? This was 2015. I thought, okay, a few weeks in detox, he's going to be okay. Well, he wasn't, and he thought he would be. But sure enough, that just takes hold. It overpowers free will. When Jamie finally came to us one day when he had hurt his arm, and again, he was at a summer camp and took some medication for that, and then realized, you know what, he's going to be in big trouble again. And he said, Dad, I need to go to rehab. And I remember breaking down in tears at that time. And I said, I've never been more proud of you than I am to hear that. And after another short stay here, he had met with a therapist. We had him seeing, and I think that's so important, not just for the one who is using, but for the family too, and family therapy. So we can all be in this together, because it's as hard on the family as it is on the kid in different ways who continues to use, so he doesn't want to feel sick. But when Jamie finally said, Dad, I need to go to rehab, that was wonderful. And through the therapist, we found a good spot in Florida, Beachway Therapy. So he was in intensive detox and stayed there for 30 to 40 days. And then the therapist there found him a place to live, because those with substance use disorder, when they're leaving intensive detox, need to acclimate back into society and need to be with their peers. And he went to a place called Sober Living, which was fairly expensive. It was about $250 a week. And that wasn't including food or Ubers, etc. And while you're supposed to find a job. And I remember the therapist, when he went looking for places with Jamie after he detoxed, and I said, boy, that's a lot of money per month and per week. And he said, in Florida, you get what you pay for. Now that's all he said. And at the time, I didn't know. So I didn't question it. And Jamie was there for about 7 months and doing great, working at a law firm. He was studying for his LSATs. And then a friend that he had met at one of the 12-step programs, I believe, patient brokered him. And for those who don't know what patient brokering it is, it's for those who have good insurance, where their urine can be what they refer to as liquid gold. And a kid will meet that other kid who has that good insurance, in this case, Jamie, at perhaps a 12-step program on the beach. You can see somebody walking with a suitcase. You got insurance? I got a place for you to live. And Jamie called me and said, Dad, I met this kid and he's got this house I can live in and it's so much less expensive. And I got this, I'm working now. And I said, boy, you're doing so well where you are. You should be going. He said, Dad, it's all covered by insurance. It's good. It's only $50 a month. Well, that kid who got Jamie to move to that house, and what patient brokering is he got paid, likely, anywhere from $200, $300, $500, or $1,000 to bring that kid to that sober living home that is anything but sober. And then that anything but sober home sends you to a doctor who sends out your blood work to the labs, who then built the insurance company, and that is called the Florida Shuffle. And it just goes round and round and round. And within 5 days of getting into that new home, after seeing a so-called addiction specialist who put my son, as we found out later, on a generic form of Xanax. Now, how, if you're an addiction doctor, do you put someone in recovery on Xanax? So Jamie was feeling pretty good about himself. I'm not absolving him for taking something. He shouldn't have taken anything. But in that home, he got a pill from someone in that house, which unfortunately was laced with fentanyl. And he died in his sleep that night, we believe, although he was found there, and they waited in that home to call the paramedics for over an hour to clean up the house from the drugs that were in there. So since that time, we've been to Congress. Jamie's mom has spoken before Congress. I have been videotaped for Congress. Laws have changed. Patient brokering now is akin to racketeering. Back then in 2016, anybody could open up a sober living home. Those laws have changed now under the Veterans Act. So a lot of it is changing, but people still need to be aware. We have to continue the conversation, that you can't trust anybody out there. You have to do your due diligence. If it doesn't smell right, it probably isn't right. And we're all in this together. And what is addiction or substance use disorder, however you want to call it, knows no socioeconomic boundaries. If it's not happening in your home, then God bless you, it isn't, but it's probably happening 2 or 3 doors down because the numbers show it. We like to say that the brain isn't the only organ affected by addiction. It also breaks families' hearts. And that's what it does. I don't think you're ever the same. But, when they say time heals all wounds, no, it doesn't. There's a hole in our family's heart that will never be filled. But I think after it took a while, and Jamie passed on December 7th of 2016, and we really didn't talk much about it, and we didn't get the toxicology reports until April. But in December of 16, when I had to call my family in Toronto and Calgary to tell them of Jamie's passing, they were shocked because I never said anything. It's the shame and stigma that we have to break. The shame and stigma of substance use disorder has to stop. We need to talk about it. So you can imagine how pissed my family was when they knew nothing, because we'd be on, if I would go up to Toronto to visit from Detroit, and I'd be there at holidays, and Jamie would be on a speakerphone talking to the family. He was working in Florida. That's what he told me. He was working in Florida. That's what he was doing. But his shame, and we acquiescing to what he wanted, said, okay, we'll keep this quiet within the family. No, it can happen. I mean, Jamie left there, and probably some of his friends who were also using probably knew why he went. But even then, he kept it a secret. And only about 6 or 7 months in, maybe 5 or 6 months in, he said, Dad, my friends are going to know now. They know, and I'm doing good. And I said, okay, you do what you want. That's your call. You're old enough to know that. But I think as family, we have to get it out there in the open. So it rips a hole in your family's heart. But I think after we didn't talk about it for some time, and after April, you get the toxicology reports, and more people know. And my book had just come out, If These Walls Could Talk, Detroit Red Wings, and it was September of 17 now. And Craig Custance from The Athletic Sports Service, which is terrific. He called me, we were talking about the book. That's really what we were publicizing. And then he said, how you doing? And it wasn't like Joey from Friends, how you doing? It was, how you doing? And I could tell in his heart, he wanted to know about Jamie. And for some reason, and maybe it was Jamie in the back of my head going, Dad, it's okay. You can talk about this now. And we did publicly for the first time. And boy, it got around, and it was on The Athletic, and I was so relieved. Finally, the burden of hiding this and not talking about it. And I heard Jamie just say, Dad, it's okay. And then his mom talked about it. And after it was out in The Athletic, ESPN called, and they did a marvelous piece on patient brokering to expose that end of addiction. And that helped, and that got the word out there. And then Fox Sports Detroit did a show on Jamie, on Wingspan for Jamie. And it was a half-hour show. And the more and more we talked about it, the better it was. And then out of that, someone said to me, you really need to start a foundation So we did that. And now to that foundation, we've raised nearly $500,000 in a foundation that really, I don't know, it's in the 70s, probably started in 2018, roughly. So in a couple of years, we've done that. And we're going to continue to raise funds, and we want to build long-term recovery housing here in Michigan. And that's our goal. It may take 3 years to get it done and going through the process, but people have been wonderful. For those, we want to start a recovering housing project so that, as you know, those that, I think the worst place that one in recovery can be is necessarily back home, where the mistrust is and where you've been, what friends you've been out with, where you're going, what time you're back. I think they got to be with peers. Jamie came back after one of his stints in recovery living here. He knew he'd be drug tested. One of the times when I went in there to get the urine from him, it wasn't warm. And sure enough, he had taped urine to his leg that was clean. So he knew he'd be gone from the house if we caught him. So all of that, it's that mistrust. So I think they need to be out there and amongst their peers while still going to meetings and being checked. And so the home living that we're looking to start is going to involve drug court mandated cases, as well as those like Jamie who were never arrested. Patrick, thank you. And I just want to remind people to please, if you can, go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org and as well, if you're struggling, our site on there for help section is vetted. And most importantly, the sites there throughout the US that have been vetted. And most importantly, there are questions to ask, which is what we didn't know as parents when it happened. Questions to ask when you're checking out a facility and doing your due diligence, whether it's dual diagnosis or not, and all types of questions like that. Parents have no idea what to ask. So that's really important too, Patrick.
Thank you for watching this edition of Recovery Happens. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please give us a call at 888-68-BW-ROC. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Blue Water Area Chamber of Commerce.